Natural disasters are forces of nature. They've shaped our planet for millennia. Earthquakes shift the very ground beneath our feet. Volcanoes build new lands. Storms and floods carve out landscapes. For most of human history, these events were seen as powerful yet infrequent acts of a wild and untamable world. We respected their power and rebuilt in their wake. But what we're witnessing in 2025 is something different, something far more troubling. The rhythm of these events has changed. Their frequency and their ferocity have escalated to a degree that is now fundamentally altering our way of life across the globe. The year began with a series of staggering blows. In January, wildfires of an unprecedented scale tore through Los Angeles, fueled by an unusual cycle of rain-fed growth followed by a severe drought. The resulting inferno was not just a local tragedy, it became the most expensive wildfire ever recorded. Then, in March, a powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake devastated Myanmar, claiming thousands of lives and leaving a nation to grapple with immense, largely uninsured losses. These were not isolated incidents. From cyclones taking strange new paths towards Australia to severe hailstorms battering Europe, the message from our planet has been stark and unequivocal. The familiar patterns of our world are breaking down. The financial cost of this new reality is, honestly, breathtaking. In just the first 6 months of 2025, the world has suffered over $131 billion in economic losses from these disasters. This figure is a cold, hard measurement of shattered homes, ruined businesses, and destroyed infrastructure. It tells a story of immense human suffering and economic instability. For insurers, who must cover a portion of these costs, the numbers are equally alarming, marking the second highest payout for a half-year period on record. This financial strain is a clear signal that the systems we have built are struggling to cope with the escalating intensity of these natural events. What we must understand is that these are no longer simply natural disasters in the old sense. While the earthquake in Myanmar was a tectonic event, the vast majority of the damage we see, nearly 90% of the financial losses, is linked to weather. And our weather is changing. The storms, the floods, the droughts, and the fires are being supercharged. They're amplified by a warming atmosphere and shifting climate patterns. We are no longer passive observers of nature's whims. Our own actions have now become a primary force, turning predictable weather into catastrophic events with devastating global consequences. The primary driver behind this intensification of our weather is climate change. For decades, scientists have warned that the continuous emission of greenhouse gases from human activity would warm our planet. We have now reached a critical point. In the first half of 2025, global temperatures soared to 1.4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, dangerously close to the threshold scientists have long identified as a point of no return. This extra heat in the atmosphere and oceans is not just a number on a chart, it's energy. It's the fuel that powers stronger storms, deeper droughts, and more extreme rainfall, turning what might have been a manageable weather event into a full-blown catastrophe. We can see the direct consequences of this warming all over the world. In Switzerland, the very mountains are becoming less stable. As global temperatures rise, ancient glaciers melt, and the permafrost, the frozen ground that acts like a natural cement holding slopes together, is thawing. This led directly to a catastrophic landslide, a stark and deadly reminder that the impacts of climate change are not confined to coastlines or arid regions. They reach into the very heart of our continents. Similarly, Cyclone Alfred's unusual southern track in Australia was a direct result of warmer ocean waters, pushing a destructive storm into areas that were historically considered safe from such threats. The devastating wildfires in California offer another clear example of this chain reaction. Climate change created the perfect conditions for disaster. Unusual rainfall patterns early in the season led to a surge in vegetation growth across the landscape. This was followed by a prolonged and intense period of drought, which baked this lush growth into tinder-dry fuel. All it took was a spark, fanned by the powerful Santa Ana winds, to ignite an inferno of historic proportions. The fires were not just a natural occurrence, they were the predictable outcome of a climate system that human activity has pushed dangerously out of balance. This is a global phenomenon. While the United States bore the brunt of the insured losses in early 2025, the impact was felt everywhere. Asia suffered immense damage, not only from the tragic earthquake in Myanmar, but also from another quake in Taiwan that disrupted the global semiconductor industry. The Indian Ocean saw powerful cyclones, and Europe was pummeled by a series of severe convective storms that brought giant hail and destructive winds. Each event, though geographically separate, is a piece of the same puzzle. They're all symptoms of a single overarching problem, a planetary system under immense stress from human-induced warming. When we ask who is to blame for the devastation of 2025, there is no single, simple answer. The responsibility is layered and shared, stretching from the highest levels of global governance down to the choices made by individuals. At the very root of the problem lies the primary cause, our collective human activity. The scientific consensus is unequivocal that the emission of greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels, industrial processes, and deforestation is the main driver of the climate change that is supercharging these disasters. In this sense, the responsibility is global, implicating every nation that has contributed to the buildup of carbon in our atmosphere. However, there is a secondary and equally critical layer of responsibility that determines how much damage these amplified disasters cause. This responsibility lies with policymakers, urban planners, and developers. For decades, there has been a relentless trend of building more homes, more infrastructure, and more valuable assets in areas that are known to be at high risk. We build sprawling communities in wildfire-prone canyons, luxury resorts on vulnerable coastlines, and entire cities on floodplains. When disaster inevitably strikes these areas, the potential for loss is magnified enormously. These decisions, often driven by short-term economic gain, place people and property directly in harm's way. Corporations also bear a significant share of the responsibility. Historically, the fossil fuel industry has been a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, while other industries have profited from development in high-risk zones. Now, all companies are being called upon to adapt to this new reality. They must factor climate risk into their operations and investments, working to reduce their own carbon footprints and ensuring their infrastructure is resilient. The decisions made in boardrooms about where to build a factory, how to source materials, or whether to invest in sustainable practices have far-reaching consequences for communities around the world, making corporations key players in both the problem and the potential solution. Finally, responsibility also rests with individuals and communities. While we operate within systems shaped by governments and corporations, our own choices matter. There's a growing awareness that we must all adapt. This means making more informed decisions about where we choose to live and how we build our homes. It means supporting policies that prioritize long-term safety over short-term development. As the public becomes more concerned, watching insurance premiums rise and coverage disappear in some areas, there's a growing demand for change. This ground-level pressure is essential for pushing authorities and companies to take the decisive action that is so urgently needed. Faced with this escalating crisis, we stand at a critical crossroads. Simply reacting to disasters after they occur, rebuilding and mourning our losses, is no longer a sustainable strategy. The relentless pace and power of these events demand a fundamental shift in our approach, from reaction to proactive prevention and adaptation. Experts, insurers, and community leaders are now united in their call for urgent action. The primary goal must be to reduce our vulnerability. We may not be able to stop a cyclone from forming, but we can drastically reduce the damage it causes when it makes landfall. This requires a new way of thinking about how and where we live. One of the most crucial steps is to enforce far more robust and disaster-resistant construction standards. Homes in wildfire zones can be built with fire-retardant materials and designed with defensible space around them. Buildings in coastal areas can be elevated, and those in earthquake-prone regions can be engineered to withstand seismic shocks. These technologies and techniques exist, but they're often seen as expensive additions rather than essential safeguards. Governments must make these standards mandatory, ensuring that all new construction is built not for the climate of the past, but for the more volatile and dangerous climate of the future. Even more importantly, we must have the courage to make difficult decisions about where we build. The single most effective way to prevent disaster losses is to restrict new development in the highest risk zones. Continuing to build in areas repeatedly scorched by fire or inundated by floods is a recipe for perpetual disaster and financial ruin. This requires strong political will to override short-term development interests in favor of long-term community safety. It also means we must seriously consider strategic relocation for some of the most vulnerable communities, a challenging but increasingly necessary conversation. Ultimately, this is a shared global challenge that demands unprecedented cooperation. No single nation can solve this crisis alone. We need international agreements that accelerate the transition to clean energy to tackle the root cause of climate change. We need to share knowledge, technology, and financial resources to help developing nations adapt, closing the protection gap where economic losses are almost entirely uninsured. From global summits to local town hall meetings, governments, industries, and citizens must work together. The future of our safety and stability depends not on pointing fingers, but on joining hands to build a more resilient world.